The masked man slammed the billionaire's head against the car door and screamed, "You're worth 12 million dead or alive, lady, so shut up and bleed quiet." Natalie Carter tasted blood, and for the first time in her life, her money couldn't save her. 30 feet away, a tired janitor set down his toolbox and went very, very still. Nobody in that parking lot knew what he used to be. Nobody knew what he was about to do. Before we go on, drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled, and if you love a story where the forgotten man rises, hit subscribe and stay with me till the end. The rain came down like it had a grudge. Daniel Brooks pushed his cart across the loading dock of the old Kessler warehouse and told himself for the third time that hour that he wasn't tired. He was 40 minutes from the end of his shift. 40 minutes from clocking out, driving home in a truck with a bad heater and standing in the doorway of a small room to watch his daughter sleep. That was the whole reward. That was enough. "You still here, Brooks?" The voice belonged to Marcus, the security guard, leaning out of the little booth with a coffee that had gone cold 2 hours ago. "Where else would I be?" Daniel said. "Home, bed, like a normal person." "I fixed the compressor on line 3. Somebody's got to." "Somebody being you." "Somebody being the only guy who reads the manual," Daniel said, and Marcus laughed, and that was the end of it. Daniel liked Marcus. Marcus didn't ask questions. In 11 months of night shifts, Marcus had never once asked why a man who could rewire a dead generator in the dark and calm down. A panicking coworker with 3 flat sentences was pushing a mop for $16 an hour. Marcus figured everybody had a story they weren't telling. Marcus was right. Daniel wheeled the cart into the far bay, where the roll-up door didn't seal right, and the rain blew in sideways. He was thinking about Lily. He was always thinking about Lily. She had a science presentation coming up, and she'd been practicing it at the kitchen table for a week, holding up a little cardboard poster and saying, "Dad, look, but pretend you're the whole class." And he would sit there and be the whole class and clap, and she'd tell him he was clapping wrong. 9 years old. 9 years old, and she thought her father was the strongest man in the world because he could open pickle jars and carry 2 bags of groceries at once. Good, Daniel thought. Let her think that. Let her think it forever. He was reaching for the light switch by the side door when he heard the tires. Not 1 car. 2. Coming in fast and then not slowing down the way cars slow down when they mean to park. They slowed down the way cars slow down when they mean to trap. Daniel's hand stopped an inch from the switch. 11 years of a quiet life, and his body still remembered. His heartbeat didn't spike. It dropped. Everything in him went low and cold and precise the way it used to, and he hated that it felt like coming home. "Don't," he told himself. "Not your problem. Call it in. Marcus has a phone. You have a phone. That's what phones are for." Then a woman screamed. Not a scared scream. A furious one. The sound of somebody who was not used to losing and had just discovered she was about to. Daniel moved to the gap in the door and looked out into the flooded lot. A black SUV had forced a silver sedan up onto the concrete divider. The sedan's front end was crumpled. 4 men were out of the SUV, already moving with the ugly confidence of men who'd done this before, and one of them had the sedan's rear door open and a woman half out of it by the arm. She was fighting. She was in a coat that probably cost more than Daniel made in 3 months, and one of her heels was gone, and she was fighting like an animal. "Get off me. Do you know who I am?" "Everybody knows who you are, Ms. Carter," the tallest one said, almost gentle. "That's the whole point." And then he slammed her head against the frame of her own car, and Daniel heard the man say the thing about 12 million and something inside Daniel, that he had bolted shut a long time ago, quietly broke off its hinges. He didn't decide to move. That was the thing he would think about later, lying awake. He didn't weigh it. He didn't picture Lily's face and choose. His hands set the mop against the wall, and his feet were already carrying him out into the rain before the thinking part of him got a vote. "Hey," Daniel called out. Calm, almost bored. "That's a lot of noise for 2 in the morning." 4 heads turned. For 1 second, the whole scene froze. 4 armed men. 1 bleeding CEO and a middle-aged janitor in a wet gray uniform standing in the light of the loading dock with nothing in his hands. The tall one actually laughed. Go back inside, old man. This doesn't involve you. Probably right, Daniel agreed. He kept walking. Thing is, I already came out, and now I'm gonna feel real stupid if I just turn around. Mister. The tall one's voice hardened. He reached into his jacket. I'm gonna tell you one time. He didn't get to tell him anything. Later, the men who survived would give the police descriptions that didn't match each other because none of them had really seen it. It was too fast, and it was too dark, and it wasn't the kind of thing their eyes were trained to follow. One of them said the janitor moved like water. One of them just kept repeating that the guy hadn't looked at any of them. He'd looked through them like a man reading a page he'd read 100 times before. The tall one was reaching for a gun. Daniel took the arm before the gun cleared the jacket, and there was a sound that a wrist is not supposed to make. And then the tall one was face down on the concrete, making a sound he was not supposed to make, and Daniel had the gun, and Daniel had already thrown the gun 40 feet into the dark where nobody could reach it because Daniel did not want it. That was the part the survivors couldn't explain. He'd had the gun, and he'd gotten rid of it. The second man swung. Daniel let the swing go past him, guided the man's own momentum into the side of the SUV, and the man folded. The third man came in low and smart, and Daniel respected it for exactly 1 instant before he took the man's legs out from under him and put a knee where it needed to go. The fourth man ran. Daniel let him, and then it was quiet, except for the rain and the woman standing there against the ruined car with blood on her temple and her mouth open, staring at a janitor who was breathing a little harder than normal and had a toolbox 30 feet behind him and not a scratch on him. She started. You okay? Daniel asked. His voice had changed. The cold thing was already receding, folding itself back up, and what was left was just a tired man in the rain. Ma'am, look at me. How many fingers? 3, Natalie Carter said. You. Good, that's good. You've got a cut, but your eyes are tracking fine. You're gonna be okay. He was already pulling out his phone. I'm calling this in. Sit down before you fall down. You're in shock, you just don't feel it yet. She did not sit down. She was Natalie Carter, and Natalie Carter did not sit down when a stranger told her to. But her legs did what her pride wouldn't, and she ended up against the side of the car anyway, sliding down until she was on the wet concrete with her ruined coat pooling around her. Who are you? She said. Daniel had the phone to his ear. Somebody who mops floors. That's not... She swallowed, blood on her teeth. Nobody mops floors like that. Daniel didn't answer. Into the phone he said, Yeah, I need police and an ambulance at the Kessler Distribution Warehouse, 9th and Halsted. Attempted kidnapping. 3 suspects down. 1 fled on foot, headed east. He rattled off details: height, jacket color, the plate on the SUV that he'd read once and would never forget, in a flat-clipped rhythm that made the dispatcher stop asking her scripted questions and just start writing. Natalie watched him. Even bleeding, even shaking some part of her brain that never turned off, was cataloging. He gave the dispatcher the direction the fourth man ran. He gave her the number of men down and the fact that none of them were armed, now that the weapon was in the lot. Northeast corner unloaded, I racked it out, which meant he'd checked, which meant even in the middle of all that, his hands had done something careful. He hung up. He crouched down in front of her, keeping a respectful distance, keeping his hands where she could see them. They're 4 minutes out, he said. You're gonna hear sirens real soon, and it's gonna feel like the loudest thing in the world. That's normal. Just breathe. You keep telling me what's normal. Because you're doing the thing where you think you're fine, and then in about 90 seconds, you're not gonna be. He almost smiled. I've seen it. Write it out. You're safe now. The word landed strange on her. Safe. She was Natalie Carter. She hadn't felt unsafe since she was 7 years old, and she had spent 30 years building a life so armored that the word didn't apply to her anymore. And here it was offered to her by a man in a wet janitor's shirt who had just put 3 men on the ground and thrown away a gun and then knelt in the rain to tell her to breathe. What's your name? She said. Daniel. Daniel what? Just Daniel's fine. It is not fine. Her voice cracked and she hated it. You understand what you just did. Do you understand who those men were, what they wanted, what would have happened? I understand fine, ma'am. Then why won't you tell me your name? Daniel looked at her for a long moment, rain running off both of them. And something crossed his face. She'd see it 100 times over the coming months, and never fully decode it, something like a door being held closed against a wind. Because a name comes with a story, he said quietly. And I got out of the story business a long time ago. The first siren cut through the rain. Marcus came running out of the booth, about the same time the first cruiser turned in and stopped dead in the middle of the lot, taking in the 3 groaning men and the crashed cars and the CEO on the ground, and Daniel crouched beside her and said the only thing that came to mind, which was, Brooks, what in God's name? Marcus, good. Do me a favor and stand by the gate, wave the ambulance in, they always miss the turn. And Marcus, because it was Daniel. Because Daniel had a way of handing you a job in the middle of chaos that made the chaos feel survivable, went and stood by the gate and waved the ambulance in. The next 2 hours were noise and light. Daniel had done this dance before from the other side, and he moved through it like a man who knew exactly how much to say, and not one word more. He gave his statement. He said he'd heard a disturbance and intervened. When a young officer asked how a maintenance worker had disarmed an armed man, Daniel said, "Adrenaline's a hell of a thing." And the young officer wrote it down, and an older detective standing behind him did not write it down and looked at Daniel a beat too long. They put Natalie in the back of the ambulance to check her over. She kept turning her head to find him through the open doors. He was over by the cruiser, hands in his pockets, answering questions, and every time somebody official-looking got too close to him, he seemed to get smaller and grayer and more forgettable until he was just a shape in a uniform, just a warehouse guy, just nobody. She would remember that. How hard he worked at being nobody. A paramedic pressed gauze to her temple. "You're lucky, Ms. Carter. Superficial. Could have been a lot worse." "Yes," she said, not looking at him. "It could have." When the detective finally let Daniel go near 4 in the morning, Daniel walked back to the loading dock to get his toolbox. Natalie intercepted him halfway, a blanket around her shoulders, that she hadn't asked for her assistant already on the phone somewhere behind her, a whole apparatus of wealth and security reassembling itself around her by the minute. "They're saying you can go home," she said. "That's usually how it works." "Daniel," she stepped in front of him. Even like this, bandaged, soaked up half the night, there was steel in her that made men in boardrooms lose their train of thought. "I want to do something for you. I don't care what it is, a reward, a job, anything, name it." "I don't want anything, ma'am." Everybody wants something. And there it was, the sentence she'd built a whole world view on. Everybody wants something. She'd said it to investors and rivals and men who'd claimed to love her. It had never once failed her. It was, she believed, the truest thing she knew about human beings. Daniel just shook his head slowly and picked up his toolbox and said the thing that would keep her awake the rest of the night. "No," he said. "Not everybody." And he walked past her toward a beat-up truck with a bad heater and drove home to watch his daughter sleep. And Natalie Carter stood in the rain in a $2,000 coat and realized for the first time in years that she had just met a person she could not read. He got home at 4:40. The babysitter, Mrs. Alvarez from 2 doors down, was asleep on the couch with the TV murmuring. He paid her. He always paid her, even when she waved him off, and walked her the 10 steps to her own door, and thanked her, and then came back and stood in the hallway of his own apartment, and let his hands shake for exactly 1 minute. Then he stopped them. Because he could. Because he'd learned how. He eased open the door to Lily's room. She was sprawled sideways the way kids sleep, one arm off the mattress, the cardboard science poster propped against the wall where she could see it first thing when she woke up. Why Things Break and How We Fix Them by Lily Brooks. Grade 4. She'd drawn a picture of a light bulb and a heart, and Daniel had never understood the connection and had never once asked, because whatever the connection was, it was hers. He sat on the floor by her bed, the way he did some nights when the old life came too close, and he watched her breathe. 11 years ago, he had held another person while she stopped breathing. His wife, Sarah. A car on an icy road, and a phone call, and a hospital hallway, that he could still walk in his memory tile by tile. He had been 1,000 miles away on a job, a mission. They'd called it doing the thing he was better at than almost anyone alive, saving strangers when the one person who mattered slipped away without him. He had made a promise in that hallway. 3 of them, actually. Never again the violence. Never again the danger. Never again the man who was so busy saving the world that he wasn't there for the one small world that was his. He'd kept those promises for 11 years. He'd traded every ounce of the man he used to be for the right to sit on this floor and watch this child breathe. And tonight, in a flooded parking lot, he'd broken all 3 in under 30 seconds. "Dad?" Lily's voice thick with sleep, her eyes half open. "Why are you on the floor?" "Couldn't sleep, baby. Go back down." "You wet?" "It's raining out." She reached out and put her small hand on his forearm, the way she'd done since she was a toddler, and left it there, and was asleep again in about 4 seconds. Daniel sat very still so as not to disturb her hand. "I won't lose you," he thought. "Whatever tonight starts, whatever comes of it, I will not lose you." I didn't know yet that it had already started. He didn't know that 30 miles away in a penthouse, she suddenly couldn't stand to be alone. Natalie Carter was sitting at a desk with a bandage on her head and her laptop open, typing 3 words into a search bar. Daniel. Brooks. Rescue. He didn't know that she wouldn't sleep either. He didn't know that the men in the parking lot were not the end of something. They were the beginning. Natalie Carter did not accept things she couldn't understand. It was depending on who you asked either her greatest strength or the flaw that had cost her every relationship she'd ever had. By 6 in the morning, she had reconstructed most of the night in the cold light of a spreadsheet mind. The kidnapping. She understood she was rich, she was public, and there were people who'd lost money betting against Carter Dynamics who'd be glad to see her hurt. Fine. She'd add 3 layers of security and never think about the specific men again. What she could not file away was Daniel. "Adrenaline's a hell of a thing." That was what the police report would say, he said. Natalie had watched a great many people lie to her over the years. It was in a sense her profession to know when, and Daniel had not lied. He had simply declined to explain. There was a difference, and it fascinated her, because in her experience only 2 kinds of people declined to explain themselves. People with nothing worth hiding, and people with everything worth hiding. Daniel Brooks was not the first kind. "Priya," she said into the phone at 6:04 a.m. to an assistant who had learned long ago that Ms. Carter's clock was not the world's clock. "I need everything on a man named Daniel Brooks. Works maintenance at the Kessler warehouse on 9th. Late 30s. Has a daughter. On it. Should I?" "And Priya, whatever you find, bring it to me first. Not the security team, not legal, me." She hung up and sat in the enormous silence of her apartment 40 floors up with a view of the whole sleeping city. And she pressed her fingers gently against the bandage on her temple, and she thought he threw the gun away. That was the detail that wouldn't leave her. Not the speed, not the 3 men on the ground. The gun. He'd had it in his hand. She'd seen it, a loaded weapon and 4 attackers, and every reason in the world to keep it. And he had emptied it and thrown it into the dark on purpose in the middle of a fight, because some part of him had decided that a gun was a line he would not cross even to save his own life. Natalie had spent her entire career surrounded by people who would do anything to win. She had never, not once, met someone whose first instinct in a crisis was to make himself less dangerous. She didn't have a word for what that was. She would spend a long time looking for one. Priya called back at 9:15. Her voice was strange. "Ms. Carter, I have the file, but you should know I hit a wall almost immediately, and then the wall sort of opened." Meaning there's almost nothing on Daniel Brooks from the last 11 years. Rental history, a work record, warehouses, mostly a few years driving a truck, a stint doing HVAC repair. A daughter, Lily, enrolled at Fillmore Elementary. A wife deceased 11 years ago, car accident. It's the picture of a completely ordinary man having a completely difficult life. And before 11 years ago, a pause. Before 11 years ago, Priya said carefully. There's no Daniel Brooks at all. Not the way there should be. And when I ran his photo through some of the databases we use for security vetting, 3 of them flagged it, and one of them— She hesitated. One of them sent back a single line that said the record was restricted, and then it locked my search. Natalie set down her coffee. Locked it how? Government level how, Ms. Carter? The silence on the line stretched out. Natalie walked to the window with the phone in her hand. Down there, somewhere in a small apartment in an unfashionable part of the city, a man who officially had no past was making breakfast for his daughter and telling himself last night had never happened. Priya, Natalie said slowly, get me an address and clear my afternoon. Ms. Carter, the security team is going to want— The security team can want— Clear my afternoon. Daniel spent the day being ordinary on purpose. He made Lily eggs the way she liked them, hard enough that she could pick them up with her fingers, which the parenting books probably frowned on, and which was their tradition anyway. He listened to her run through the science presentation for the 9th time. He drove her to school. He waved at the crossing guard. He came home and slept 4 hours badly and got up and started thinking about tonight's shift. He did not turn on the news. If he'd turned on the news, he'd have seen his own back. They hadn't gotten his face, thank God, in grainy security footage over a chyron that said, Mystery. Good Samaritan saves tech CEO. And he'd have known what was already true, which was that people were looking for him. Reporters. The internet. Everyone loves a mystery hero. He didn't turn on the news. So the knock on his door at 3:30 in the afternoon caught him with a dish towel in his hand. He looked through this peephole, and every muscle in his body went quiet and ready. It was her. No entourage, no black SUVs, just Natalie Carter in flat shoes and a plain coat and a butterfly bandage on her temple, where the fancy dressing had been, standing in the hallway of his apartment building, looking deeply out of place and completely determined. Daniel opened the door about 6 inches. You shouldn't be here, he said. I know. How did you get my address? I'm a billionaire, Natalie said. I have people. It's a whole thing. A ghost of a smile. May I come in? No. The smile faded not into offense, but into something more genuine. Okay, fair. Then can I stand in the hallway and say 3 things, and then leave? Daniel looked at her. He looked past her at the stairwell at the exits the way he couldn't stop himself from doing. Nobody with her. She'd come alone. That was either very foolish or very deliberate, and he suspected it was both. 3 things, he said. Then you leave. 1. She held up a finger. Thank you. I know you don't want to hear it. I've said thank you a lot of times in my life and meant it maybe twice, and this is one of the 2, so please just let me say it. Thank you. I'd be dead or worse, and I'm not because of you. Daniel said nothing, but he didn't close the door. 2. Second finger. I ran a background check on you this morning. I want to be honest about that because you strike me as a man who values honesty, and because you're going to find out anyway, and I'd rather you find out from me. Something flickered behind Daniel's eyes. His grip on the edge of the door changed very slightly. Natalie caught it, she caught everything, and hurried on. And I want you to know that it came back locked. Whatever you were, whoever you were, it's sealed at a level that scared my assistant, and I have people who don't scare. I didn't get in, Daniel. I want to be clear. I know there's a wall. I don't know what's behind it. And— She took a breath. And I'm not going to try to climb it. That's part of the promise. I came here to tell you I saw the wall, and I'm going to respect the wall. I don't need to know what you were. I only care what you are. The hallway was very quiet. Somewhere below, a TV played. A neighbor's kid laughed. That's 2, Daniel said. His voice had gone rough. What's 3? Natalie Carter, who negotiated for a living, who had a reputation for going into every room already knowing how it would end, took the longest pause of the whole conversation. 3, she said. I have never in my life met someone who didn't want anything from me. Do you understand how that? No. You don't, you can't, and that's the whole point. Everyone wants something. My whole life, everyone has wanted something, and I built myself to survive that. I built a machine, a person made out of expecting to be used. And last night a man saved my life, and I offered him anything on earth, and he said no. not everybody, and walked away, and I have not stopped thinking about it since. So here's 3. She met his eyes and didn't look away. I don't have a friend, Daniel. I have a company and a staff and a security detail and 4,000 employees and a board of directors, and I do not have one single person in this world who wants nothing from me. And I think you might be the only person alive who could just be a person around me. And I know that's insane, and I know you have every reason to shut this door, but I had to come say it out loud one time to your face. So, that's 3. The dish towel was still in Daniel's hand. He looked down at it like he'd forgotten it was there. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then from inside the apartment, a small voice called out, "Dad, who's at the door?" Daniel closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, something in his face had shifted, not softened exactly, but decided the way it had decided in the parking lot faster than thought. "That's my daughter," he said quietly. "Lily. She's 9. I heard about her, in the file. Natalie stopped herself. "That's the wrong thing to say. I don't know how to do this. I'm very good at almost everything, and I have no idea how to do this." And for the first time since the rain, Daniel Brooks almost smiled. A real one. It changed his whole face. "Yeah," he said. "You're doing it worse than the kidnappers, honestly." Natalie let out a startled laugh, a real one surprised out of her. Nothing like the polished sound she used in meetings, and pressed the back of her hand to her mouth like she couldn't believe it had come out. "Dad?" Lily again, closer now, footsteps. "Is it Mrs. Alvarez? Tell her I finished my poster." Daniel didn't move to close the door. He didn't open it either. He stood in the gap between the woman in the hallway and the child behind him, between the two worlds he had spent 11 years keeping 1,000 miles apart, and he made a choice that he would spend the rest of the story either thanking or cursing himself for. "It's not Mrs. Alvarez, baby," he called back, not taking his eyes off Natalie. "It's a friend." The word hung in the air. Friend. He watched it land on her, watched it do something to her face that money never had. "Go set out 3 plates, Daniel said. "I guess we've got company for a little while." Lily's whoop of delight echoed down the hall. And Natalie Carter, the woman who was worth 12 million dead or alive, who had never in her adult life been invited anywhere for the pleasure of her company, and not her power, stood in a dim hallway that smelled like somebody else's cooking, and felt her throat close, and understood dimly that she had walked into this building to repay a debt, and was going to walk out of it owing a far larger one. Daniel stepped back and opened the door the rest of the way. "Come in," he said. "But I'm telling you now, she's gonna make you look at the poster, and you're gonna clap, and she's gonna tell you you're clapping wrong." "I've clapped in front of world leaders," Natalie said, stepping over the threshold, wiping quickly at her eyes and pretending she wasn't. "Doesn't matter," Daniel said, and shut the door behind her against the gray afternoon. "You're gonna clap wrong. Everybody does." The 3 plates lasted about 4 minutes before Lily decided that a guest of honor required the good glasses too. The ones with the painted flowers that had come from a yard sale and that Daniel let her use exactly twice a year. "These are for special," Lily announced, climbing onto a chair to reach the cabinet. "Dad, is this special? Careful up there." "But is it?" Daniel looked at the woman sitting at his kitchen table, with a bandage on her head and a napkin she clearly did not know what to do with, and he said, "Yeah, baby, I guess it's special." Natalie watched the child hand her a glass with a chip on the rim, like it was a crown jewel, and she said, "Thank you, Lily. It's the nicest glass I've ever been given." And she meant it. And the strange thing was that she wasn't performing. She'd spent her whole life performing warmth. This was the first time in years the warmth had gotten there before the performance. "You talk fancy," Lily said, sitting back down and studying her. "Lily, it's okay," Natalie said. "I do talk fancy. I've been told it's off-putting." "What's off-putting mean?" "It means people don't want to be near you," Natalie said, and then heard herself and something moved behind her eyes. Daniel caught it. He caught everything the same way she did. That was the thing they'd both realized slowly, that they were two people who'd survived by watching, and it was exhausting to always be the one watching, and it was a specific and unfamiliar relief to be watched back by someone who understood the cost of it. "It doesn't mean that," Daniel said, setting down the eggs. "It means you use big words. That's all. Eat." "Dad says I use big words," Lily confided. "I learned exsanguinate." "You learned what?" Natalie said. "It's when you run out of blood. I read it. It's for my presentation." Lily frowned. "Well, not exactly, but I'm gonna work it in." Natalie's hand went without her permission to the bandage at her temple. Daniel saw that too. For 1 second, the whole night in the rain sat down at the table with them uninvited, and Daniel said easily, gently, the way you'd redirect a car off a shoulder. "Presentation's about fixing things right. Broken things, show her the poster after if she wants. Eat first." And Lily, who had the attention span of a healthy 9-year-old, was off onto the subject of the poster, and the light bulb, and the heart. And the moment passed, and Natalie looked at Daniel across the table, with an expression he couldn't read, and mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." He gave the smallest nod, and went back to his eggs. She stayed 2 hours. She should have stayed 20 minutes. She had a company. She had a board meeting at 8 the next morning that 4,000 jobs depended on. She had a phone in her coat that had buzzed 11 times, and she had not looked at it once. And later Priya would tell her that was the first time in 6 years of working for her that Natalie Carter had gone 2 hours without checking her phone, and Priya had genuinely considered calling someone. But she stayed. She looked at the poster and clapped, and was informed correctly that she was clapping wrong. She learned that Lily's mother had died when Lily was too little to remember her, which Lily reported with the strange matter-of-factness of children who've only ever known an absence and not a loss. She learned that Daniel could not cook anything but breakfast food, and had built his entire life around the fact that breakfast can technically be served at any hour. She learned that the apartment had exactly 2 decorations that weren't Lily's drawings. A small framed photo turned slightly away from the room, which she did not ask about, and a wrench mounted on the wall over the door that she assumed was a joke until Daniel, catching her looking, said only, "First thing I ever fixed, after," and did not explain what after meant, and she did not push because she had promised the wall, and she was a woman who kept her promises, even the strange ones. At 8. Lily's eyes started to droop mid-sentence, and Daniel said, "That's the wall, baby, you hit it," and carried her to bed, even though she was 9, and insisted loudly that she could walk. And Natalie sat alone in the small kitchen, and looked at the wrench over the door, and felt something she couldn't name and didn't like, because she was extremely good at naming things. When Daniel came back out, she was standing coat on. "I've overstayed," she said. "I do that. Not usually the opposite, usually I leave everything early, but..." She stopped. "Daniel, I need to tell you something, and it's going to ruin the evening, and I've been trying to figure out how to not say it, and I can't, because you'd rather have honesty." Daniel went still. "Say it." "The men from last night." Natalie's voice changed. The fancy talk fell away, and something colder and older came up under it. "The police are treating it as a random kidnapping. Rich woman opportunity ransom. I let them treat it that way. It was easier. But you don't believe it." "I don't believe it." She met his eyes. "The tall one. The one you dealt with first. When they had me in the car before you came out, he said something. And I've been turning it over all day. He didn't say we grabbed you because you're rich. He said..." She swallowed. "He said he told us you'd be alone tonight." The kitchen got very quiet. "He," Daniel said. "He." Natalie's jaw tightened. "Somebody told them my schedule. Somebody knew I'd sent my driver home. Somebody knew I was taking the back route because I'd been avoiding a reporter. Daniel, 4 people on this earth knew where I was going to be at that hour last night, and I trust 3 of them with my life, and I've trusted the 4th one for 11 years. Daniel pulled out a chair. Not for himself, for her. "Sit down." "I don't want to sit. You're about to say a name out loud that you've been afraid to think all day. Sit down. It's easier sitting." She sat. And Daniel sat across from her and folded his hands on the table, and for the first time all evening, the janitor was gone, and the other man, the one from the parking lot, the calm, cold, precise one, was fully present at the kitchen table, And Natalie realized she'd been half waiting for him to come back, because he was the one she'd actually come to talk to. "Tell me who you trust," Daniel said quietly, "and I'll tell you which one to worry about." His name was Marcus Delgado, no relation to the warehouse. Marcus, which Daniel noted and filed and did not mention, and he had been Natalie's chief operating officer for 6 years and her friend for 11, going back to when Carter Dynamics was 4 people in a rented office and a patent she'd mortgaged her apartment to file. "I was there before the money," Natalie said. "He was there when there wasn't any money. You don't understand that means something. Everyone who came after came for the money. Marcus came before it. He held my hand at my mother's funeral. He talked me out of quitting twice. He is not, he cannot be. I didn't say it was him. You implied. I asked you to name the people who knew where you'd be." Daniel's voice was level. 4 people. 3 you'd die for. And a 4th you said you'd trusted for 11 years, which is a funny way to phrase it, Natalie. You didn't say you trusted him with your life, like the other 3. You said you'd trusted him for 11 years. That's a length of time. That's not a feeling. When people are certain, they tell you the feeling. When they're scared, they tell you the years. Natalie stared at him. "Who taught you to listen like that?" she whispered. "The wall," Daniel said. "Behind the wall. Now." "The 4th person. It's not Marcus, is it? You wanted it to be Marcus because a friend betraying you is a story you already know how to survive. Who's the 4th? The color had gone out of Natalie's face. "His name is Victor," she said. "Victor Hale. He was my business partner, my first one. Before Marcus, before any of them. He co-founded Carter Dynamics with me, and it went bad. 4 years ago. He wanted to sell the company to a defense contractor, and I wouldn't, and it got ugly, and there were lawyers, and in the end, I bought him out. Forced him out, he'd say. He didn't know I'd be there last night. He couldn't have. I haven't spoken to Victor Hale in 4 years. Then why?" Daniel said. "Did you say his name like that?" And Natalie Carter, who did not cry, who had trained herself out of it at 7 years old in a house where crying got you nothing, put her hand over her mouth and did not answer, because the true answer was too much. And Daniel let the silence sit, because he knew what that silence was. He'd sat in it himself. "He sent me a card," she finally said. 3 weeks ago, for my birthday. Nobody sends me cards. And it said, enjoy it while it lasts. V. And I threw it away and told myself it was nothing. And last night, a man put a gun to my head and said someone told him I'd be alone." Her voice broke clean in half. "And I threw away the card, Daniel. I threw it away because I didn't want it to be true." Daniel reached across the table and put his hand over hers. He didn't decide to. It was the 2nd time in 2 days his hands had moved before his brain got a vote, and both times it had been for her. "Okay," he said. "Okay. Now we know something. We don't know anything. I don't have proof I have a card I threw in the trash and a kidnapper's half sentence. We know he warned you," Daniel said. 3 weeks ago. Enjoy it while it lasts. That's not a man who wants money, Natalie. A man who wants money doesn't warn you. He wanted you to know it was coming. He wanted you scared before it happened. That's not business. That's not even revenge, not the clean kind." He paused, and something crossed his face, something she'd learned to read as the moment the old life recognized itself in a new one. "That's a man who wants to watch." Natalie pulled her hand back. "Not from him. From the truth." "I have a board meeting at 8, she said, standing too fast, gathering herself the way she gathered herself before every hard room. I can't, this is insane. I came here to thank a man who saved my life, and now I'm sitting in his kitchen accusing my first business partner of hiring kidnappers based on a birthday card. Natalie, I run a company. Daniel, I don't do this. I don't sit in strangers' kitchens falling apart. This isn't, Natalie." He stood too. "You're not falling apart. You're the opposite. You spent all day today being scared and pretending you weren't, and you just spent 5 minutes being scared out loud, and that's not falling apart. That's the first honest hour you've probably had in a year. So sit back down or don't, but stop apologizing for it." She stopped. She looked at him for a long moment. "You keep telling me what's normal," she said, echoing the parking lot. And this time, it wasn't an accusation. It was almost a thank you. Yeah, Daniel said. I've been where you are. Somebody wanted people I loved. I know the shape of it. And I know it doesn't help to be told you're strong, so I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you the useful thing instead. He held her eyes. You're not alone in it anymore. That's it. That's the whole useful thing. You walked in here alone with this, and you're not walking out with it alone. And Natalie Carter, who had built an empire on the certainty that everyone wanted something and no one could be trusted, and being alone was just the price of winning, stood in a small kitchen and let a man she'd known for one day tell her she wasn't alone and did not correct him. And that was in its own quiet way the largest thing that had happened to her in 10 years. Then Daniel's whole body changed. She saw it happen. 1 second he was reaching for her coat where it had slipped off the chair, and the next he was 3 feet away from the window with the light already off. And she hadn't seen him cross the distance or flip the switch, and his voice when it came was so low it was almost nothing. Get away from the window. What? Away from the window. Now. Wall side. Move. She moved. Something in his voice made argument impossible. Daniel stood at the edge of the dark window, one finger easing the curtain a half-inch, and looked down at the street 4 floors below. And Natalie pressed against the wall with her heart slamming, watched his face, and saw it go to that cold flat place and stay there. Black sedan, Daniel said quietly. Across the street. Engine off. Been there. He did some calculation she couldn't follow. The hood's not steaming, and it's 40 degrees out, so a while, since before you got here or right after. Maybe it's just 2 men in it. Front seats, not talking. People waiting for a friend talk or look at their phones or the lights on. Those 2 are watching a door. He let the curtain fall. This door. The blood roared in Natalie's ears. They followed me. I led them here. Oh God, Daniel, I led them right to your... She couldn't finish it. Lily was asleep 30 feet away. Stop. His hand found her shoulder in the dark. Stop. You didn't lead anyone anywhere. If Victor's got people on you, they've been on you all day. This isn't your fault, and it doesn't matter whose fault it is, because in about 2 minutes, none of that helps us. So I need you to do exactly what I say, and not one thing more. Can you do that? She nodded, then realized he might not see it in the dark. Yes. They don't know you clocked them. Right now, they think they've got a sleeping CEO and a nobody. That's our whole advantage. They think I'm a nobody. Don't take that away from them. He was already moving quiet as Smoke checking the second window. The door some map of the apartment building he seemed to have made without her noticing. How'd you get here? My car. I drove myself. I told you I came alone. Where's it parked? Around the side lot behind them. Good. Not the front. Good. He came back to her. Here's what's happening. You're gonna leave in about 10 minutes out the front, loud on your phone, real annoyed, like a CEO who wasted an evening slumming. You're gonna get in your car, and you're gonna drive home the normal way, and you're gonna let them follow you, because right now, them following you is 100 times better than them staying here. And leave you and Lily with, they don't want me and Lily, they want you. The second you're gone, they're gone. He said it flat, certain, and she almost believed it, and then she saw the thing. He wasn't saying, flicker across his face for 1/2 second, and her stomach dropped, because Daniel Brooks was not a man whose face flickered. You don't believe that, she whispered. You just said it so I'd leave. You don't actually believe they'll all go. Daniel looked at her in the dark, and this was the moment she would understand it much later. Looking back. This was the moment she stopped being a woman he'd rescued and started being a person he couldn't lie to. No, he admitted. I think one car follows you. I think if Victor's as careful as that birthday card says he is, one stays. To find out who the nobody is. Because a nobody just put 3 of his men in the hospital last night, and he's gonna want to know what that nobody's worth. A muscle moved in his jaw. So one follows you, and one stays for me. Then I'm not leaving. You're leaving, Daniel said. Because if you stay, they've got both of us in one box, and I've got a 9-year-old asleep down that hall, and I can protect one problem at a time, but not 2. You leaving splits them. You leaving is the smart play. And Natalie—" His voice dropped, and something raw came into it, something from behind the wall. "I have spent 11 years being nobody, so that no one would ever have a reason to come to this door. And tonight, there's a car outside it. So I need you to trust that I know exactly how bad this is, and I need you to do the thing that makes it less bad. And the thing that makes it less bad is you walking out that front door in 9 minutes, complaining loudly about the parking." Natalie stared at him. Then she did the thing she was best at in all the world, the thing that had built the company, the thing Victor Hale had hated her for. She made a hard call in a bad second and committed to it completely. "Okay," she said. 9 minutes. I complain about the parking. What do you need from me before I go?" And Daniel almost smiled because there it was, the thing he'd seen in the rain, the steel under the fear. "Your phone number," he said. "The real one, not the office, and a promise." "What promise?" "When you get home and your details around you and you're safe behind all that money." He was pulling something from a drawer now, moving fast, a pen, the back of an envelope. "You don't call the police. Not yet. Not tonight. Daniel, there are armed men outside your— If you call the police tonight, they roll up loud, the cars scatter, we lose our one shot at finding out who they answer to, and Victor learns you're onto him, and he goes quiet and careful, and next time you won't see it coming." His pen moved. "You call the police tonight, you're safe for a week and dead in a month. You give me 48 hours, and I find out who Victor's using and how, and then we hand the cops a case instead of a scare." He looked up. 48 hours, that's the promise. Can you give me that?" The old Natalie, the one from yesterday, from before the rain, would have said no. The old Natalie called the police, called the lawyers, called the security team, threw money and force at every problem until it went away, because that was the only kind of power she trusted. The new one, the one who was 2 days old and standing in a dark kitchen, looked at the man who'd thrown away a gun to save her life and said, 48 hours. Good. He handed her the envelope. A phone number in blocky handwriting. Memorize it, then get rid of it. Don't put it in your phone. If Victor's got someone inside your world, your phone's the first thing they'd read. He steered her toward the door. "Now, coat on, phone out. You're annoyed. You wasted your whole evening on some warehouse guy who wouldn't take your money, and you're never coming back to this part of town. Sell it." Natalie put on her coat. She put her phone to her ear, and in the doorway, half turned, she stopped. "Daniel, go. If something happens to you tonight," she said, and her voice was steady and low and completely certain, "because you sent me out that door safe and kept the danger in here with your daughter. I will spend every dollar I have burning Victor Hale's whole world to the ground. I want you to know that. So you make sure nothing happens to you, because I've buried enough people I trusted, and I only just met you, and I am not doing it twice in one lifetime." Daniel looked at her for one long second. "Nobody's dying tonight," he said. "Now sell the parking." She sold the parking. Her voice carried down the stairwell, sharp and rich, and irritated a woman on the phone complaining that she'd driven all the way out to this godforsaken neighborhood as a courtesy, and the man wouldn't even take a check, and the whole building could hear her. And across the street, both men in the black sedan sat up, and one of them said something to the other, and Natalie Carter walked out the front door, into the cold, still complaining, and got in her car and drove away into the night. And one sedan pulled out and followed her taillights, and one sedan stayed. Daniel stood at the window in the dark and watched the second car not move, and felt the old life close over his head like water, and thought about the promise he'd made in a hospital hallway 11 years ago, and knew he was about to break it again. Then he went to check on his daughter. Lily was asleep, one arm off the mattress, the poster propped where she'd see it in the morning. Why Things Break and How We Fix Them. Daniel stood in the doorway and looked at her for exactly 3 seconds, which was all he'd let himself. And then he did something he hadn't done in 11 years. He called a number he'd sworn he'd never call again. It rang twice. "You've reached a number that doesn't exist," said a voice on the other end. Male, older, dry as sand. Which is interesting because the only person alive who has this number is dead. "Hello, Ray," Daniel said. Silence on the line. A long one. "Daniel." The dry voice had changed. "Danny. My God. I put flowers on your empty grave for a decade. You know that once a year. Felt like a damn fool doing it and I did it anyway. I need a favor, Ray. Course you do. Man doesn't come back from the dead to say hi. A creak like an old man sitting forward in an old chair. You're calling on the ghost line, which means you're in something, which means 11 years of me leaving you alone just ended. Talk. Daniel talked. Quietly at the window, watching the car. He gave Ray a name, Victor Hale, and a description of 4 men and a plate number, and the make of a black sedan, sitting across the street from his daughter's bedroom, and Ray listened and did not interrupt. And when Daniel was done, Ray was quiet for a moment. You went and got a life, Ray said finally. Didn't you? All this time. You went and got a kid, and a job, and a normal little life, and somebody just walked into it. Somebody walked into it. And you want to know if you can put it back, Ray said gently. After. You want to know if you handle this one thing quiet. Careful the way you used to. You want to know if you can go back to being the janitor after. If she stays clean your little life. Daniel didn't answer. Danny. Ray's voice was almost kind. I'm gonna run that plate, and I'm gonna pull what I can on your Victor Hale, and I'm gonna call you back inside the hour. But I want you to hear something first from a man who watched you try to disappear once already. A breath. You can't do this halfway. You go back in, you go all the way in, or they eat you alive, and they eat that kid alive too. There's no version where you dip one hand in the old water and keep the rest of yourself dry. It doesn't work like that. It never worked like that. That's the whole reason you left. I know, Ray. Do you? A pause. Then answer me one question and I'll make your calls. That woman, the CEO, the one you sent out the front door. Ray's voice sharpened, all the dryness gone. You threw yourself in front of a kidnapping for a stranger, and then you let her come to your house, and then you got her out safe and kept the danger for yourself. Danny, is she a stranger? Or is she the reason you just picked up a phone you swore you'd never touch again? Daniel stood in the dark of his daughter's doorway, with the phone against his ear, and the second sedan sitting cold and patient across the street, and he did not answer for a long time. Run the plate, Ray, he said finally. And Ray, who had known Daniel for 20 years, and had put flowers on his empty grave for 10 of them, heard everything in the non-answer that he needed to hear, and said softly, Yeah, that's what I thought. Watch the car, kid. I'll call you back. The line went dead. Jar. Across town. Natalie Carter drove the long way home with a black sedan, 4 cars back, and a phone number burning in her memory, and her hands steady on the wheel for the first time all night, because she had a plan now, or the beginning of one, or at least a person, which was more than she'd had in years. She did not go home. 48 hours, she'd promised. Don't call the police, she'd promised. She'd keep both. But Natalie Carter had built a company from nothing by understanding one thing better than anyone alive. Information was the only real currency, and she had spent 4 years pretending she didn't have a source who could get it. She pulled into an all-night parking garage, went up 3 levels, killed her lights, and watched the black sedan drive past the entrance, slow, uncertain, and keep going, because they'd lost her, because she'd wanted them to. Then she took out her phone, her personal phone, the one even Priya didn't have the number for, and she called someone she had sworn 4 years ago in a very different mood that she would never speak to again. It rang once. Well, said a warm, amused, entirely too comfortable voice. Natalie Carter, on this line, at this hour. A soft laugh that made the hair on her arms stand up. I have to say, I've been wondering how long it would take. Natalie's whole body went cold. Because she hadn't dialed Victor Hale. She had dialed the one man on earth she thought was still on her side. The third of the 3 she'd said she would die for. The one she'd trusted before the money. And Victor Hale's voice was the one that answered. Oh, Natalie, Victor said, gentle, delighted, terrible. You still don't understand, do you? You never understood. You think there are 4 people who knew where you'd be last night. A pause, luxurious, cruel. There were only ever 3. Because one of your 4 has been mine the whole time. The phone shook in Natalie's hand. Go home, Victor said softly. Kiss your empty apartment goodnight. And ask yourself which of the people you'd die for is the one holding the knife. You've got until I decide to tell you. And Natalie, His voice dropped, and all the warmth fell out of it at once. "Your warehouse man. The nobody I know about him now too, and I'm so very much looking forward to finding out what he's worth." The line went dead, and Natalie Carter sat alone in a dark parking garage 40 floors below, her own gleaming life, and understood two things at once, with the terrible clarity that had made her rich, that the person she trusted most in the world was going to betray her, and that she didn't yet know which one it was, and that a man across the city with a sleeping daughter had just become the only person on earth she could actually trust, and Victor Hale now knew his name. She started the car. She did not drive home. She drove toward a beat-up truck with a bad heater and a wrench mounted over the door, and she broke the speed limit the whole way, and she prayed to a God she'd stopped believing in at 7 years old that she'd get there before the second sedan made its move. Daniel's phone lit up at 9:52 with Ray's number, and he answered before it finished the first ring. "Talk to me, Ray." "Plate's a rental," Ray said, and the dryness was gone, replaced by something Daniel hadn't heard in his old friend's voice in a long time, something clipped and worried. "Paid cash through 3 shells, which regular criminals don't do. Do Danny regular criminals use a stolen car? This is money, and this is patience. You're Victor Hale. I pulled him. Danny, listen to me. He didn't just lose a company 4 years ago. He lost everything. Sold his stake under duress, and then he took what she paid him and put it all into the exact defense deal she wouldn't let the company make, and it collapsed, took him down with it. He's leveraged past his eyeballs. He's not a rich man taking revenge for sport." A pause. "He's a ruined man who thinks she ruined him. That's worse. That's the worst kind. A rich man wants to win. A ruined man just wants you to hurt as bad as he does." Daniel watched the sedan across the street. "The men. Working on the men. But the sedan out front of you, I got something you're not gonna like." Ray breathed. "It's not Victor's." Daniel went still. "Say that again." "The car following your CEO, that's a rental, that's Victor's crew. But the one parked outside your place watching your door, I ran it while you were talking. Different rental company, different shell, different money entirely. Danny, there are 2 operations on your street tonight, and they don't know about each other." The old cold came up in Daniel Brooks fast and total. Two. So who's the second? His phone buzzed against his ear. A second call breaking in. A number he didn't recognize. And then it stopped, and a text came through, and Daniel read it in the dark, and his blood turned to ice water. "It's Natalie. I'm 2 minutes out. Coming to you." He answered her phone. "The person I trusted was his the whole time. Don't open the door for anyone but me." "Ray," Daniel said very quietly. "I gotta go. She's coming here." "She's Danny, no, keep her away from you, that's the whole—" "I know. You split them, that was the whole point you sent her out to." "I know, Ray." "Then why is she coming back?" And Daniel looked out at the second sedan, the one that wasn't Victor's, the one that belonged to someone Ray couldn't name, and understood with a sick lurch exactly what was happening, and he said, "Because somebody wanted her to. Somebody spooked her into running straight to the one place they couldn't follow her before. They didn't lose her at that garage, Ray. They let her go. They wanted her to lead the second team to me." Silence on the line. "Get the kid," Ray said. "Whatever you do next. Get the kid out of the line first. I'm calling in help, but I'm 40 minutes out, even breaking laws. Get the kid, Danny." The line went dead, and Daniel was already moving. He didn't panic. Panic was a luxury for people who'd never done this, and Daniel had done this, and the doing of it came back to him the way his own name would, without effort, without wanting it. He went to Lily's room and crouched by her bed and put his hand on her shoulder gentle and said, Hey, Bug. I need you to wake up for me, nice and quiet." Her eyes opened unfocused. "Is it morning?" "No, baby. It's the middle of the night, and I need you to do something, and I need you to be brave and quiet, and I promise I'll explain in the morning." He was already pulling her shoes on her feet, her coat over her pajamas. "Remember the fire drill game, where we practiced going to Mrs. Alvarez's real fast and quiet?" Lily nodded slowly, and something in her father's calm reached the part of her that had always somehow known there was more to him than pickle jars. "We're gonna play it for real. Daniel said. Right now. You go to Mrs. Alvarez's and you knock the special knock and you stay there and you don't come out for anybody but me. Not a policeman, not a nice lady, not anybody. Only me. What's the rule? Only you, Lily whispered. Only me. That's my girl. He kissed the top of her head, and for 1 second, he let himself feel all of it, and then he put it away, because feeling it wouldn't keep her alive and putting it away would. Go, fast and quiet. I love you. Go. And she went small and brave in her pajamas and coat out the back along the inside hall where no window faced the street to the door. 2 down, and Daniel watched through the crack of his own door until he heard the special knock and heard Mrs. Alvarez's voice sleepy, and then instantly alert the way grandmothers get, and heard the deadbolt turn, and only then did he breathe. One problem out of the box. Now the others. Natalie's car came around the corner. Fast, too fast. Tires complaining. And Daniel saw it from the window, and saw in the same glance the second sedan's doors open. Both of them. Both men out at once, moving toward the spot where Natalie's car was slowing. They'd been waiting for exactly this. Waiting for her to come to him so they could take them both. Daniel was out his own front door and down the stairs before he'd finished the thought, moving through the building, the way he'd moved through the parking lot, low and fast and silent, and he hit the street-level door just as Natalie's car jerked to a stop at the curb, and the 2 men closed on it from the dark. "Natalie, stay in the car," he shouted. And it was the right call and the wrong call at once, because it turned both men toward him, which was what he wanted, and it froze Natalie with her hand on the door handle, which was also what he wanted, but it also told the 2 men exactly who the nobody was. The nearer one turned and reached into his jacket, and Daniel closed the 12 feet between them in the time it took the man's hand to find the grip. And this was not like the parking lot. This man was better than the parking lot. Men, this man got the gun halfway out and got an elbow up and made Daniel work for it, but only halfway, only for a second. And then Daniel had the wrist and the arm and turned the man into his own partner, and the gun went off once into the sky, deafening, and then it was on the ground, and Daniel kicked it into the storm drain where the water took it. 2 on 1 now, and one of them furious and bleeding from where his partner's shoulder had caught his mouth. "You're the janitor," the bleeding one said, spitting. "You're the guy from last night." He was circling careful, and Daniel saw that this one had training. Real training, not thug training. "You know how much you're worth right now. He's paying double for you. Double. For a maintenance man." A grin red at the edges. "What the hell are you, man?" "Tired," Daniel said. "It's been a long 2 days." The man lunged. How was good. He was genuinely good, and for about 4 seconds, it was a real fight, the kind Daniel hadn't had in over a decade, the kind that used muscles memory kept in a locked drawer, and Natalie, who had gotten out of the car despite everything, because Natalie Carter did not stay in the car, watched from the curb with her hand over her mouth as a man she'd watched. Clap wrong at a 9-year-old science poster. 4 hours ago fought 2 trained men in the dark, and one not with rage, not with cruelty, but with a kind of terrible economy. Every motion doing exactly one thing and no more. The bleeding one went down and stayed down. And then Daniel turned breathing hard, and Natalie saw his face change, saw the fight drain out of it, and something worse come in, and he shouted, "Down!" And she didn't understand, and he was already running at her, and she realized a half-second too late that there had never been 2 men. There'd been 3. The third came from behind her car, and he wasn't reaching for a gun because he already had it out, already had it up, already had it pointed at the back of her head. And the last thing Natalie Carter saw before Daniel hit her was the man's calm, empty eyes over the barrel, and the last thing she heard was Daniel's voice wrecked, screaming her name. The gun fired. Daniel hit her at the same instant, all 200 pounds of him, and they went down together onto the cold pavement, and the shot went high and wide, because Daniel had knocked the shooter's whole line off by putting his body between the barrel and Natalie, and now they were down tangled, and the shooter was adjusting, and Daniel was between Natalie and the gun, with no time, and no distance, and no play left. So he did the only thing left to do. He threw the wrench. Not the mounted one over his door. He didn't have that, it was 4 floors up. His own wrench, the one from his belt, The one that had never left his side in 11 years of pretending to be nobody. A heavy 15-inch adjustable that he could have driven a truck with, and he threw it the way he'd once thrown things for a living. And it crossed 20 feet in the dark and caught the shooter across the temple with a sound like a dropped melon. And the man's knees unhinged, and he sat down in the street, and the gun clattered away, and he did not get up. Silence. Rain starting again, light almost apologetic. 3 men down in the street, and a 9-year-old safe, 2 doors down, and Natalie Carter underneath a maintenance worker who had a past sealed by the federal government, and a wrench in the gutter, and both his arms wrapped around her head like a cage. Natalie. His voice shook. Natalie. Are you hit? Look at me. Are you hit? No, I'm not. I'm Daniel. You're... She was patting at his back, his sides, and her hand came away wet, and for one horrible second she thought it was blood, and then realized it was just the rain. Just the rain. He wasn't hit, and she made a sound she'd never made before in her life. Half sob and half laugh, and grabbed 2 fistfuls of his soaked shirt and just held on. Okay, Daniel breathed. Okay, you're okay. We're okay. You threw a wrench, she said hysterical into his shoulder. You threw a who throws a... It was closer than the gun. There was no gun. That's why I threw the wrench, Daniel said, and Natalie laughed and cried at the same time in the middle of a wet street, surrounded by unconscious men, and Daniel held on to her, and for about 4 seconds, the whole world was just the 2 of them, alive on the pavement, and it was God, help them both, the closest thing to peace either one had felt in years. Then Daniel's head came up. His body went to that cold place again. Ray, he said. What? The car. There were 3 men out of a 2-man car. He was up on one knee now, scanning, counting, and Natalie watched the arithmetic move across his face and turn to something cold. 2 operations, Ray said, but this is 1. 3 men, 1 car, no. No. He grabbed her arm. Where's the 4th? The 4th what, Daniel? There were 3. There's always one who watches, Daniel said, and hauled her to her feet and pulled her toward the building fast. The one from the parking lot said someone told them. Victor doesn't do this himself. Victor watches, which means there's an eye on this street right now, which means he knows it went bad, which means... Natalie's personal phone rang. They both stopped dead in the doorway. She pulled it out with a shaking hand. Unknown number. She looked at Daniel. He gave one short nod. Answer it. Let him talk. We learn more than we give. She answered. She didn't say hello. Impressive, said Victor Hale's warm, ruined, terrible voice, and Daniel leaned his head against hers so he could hear it too. Genuinely. 3 of my best and your handyman went through them like they were made of paper. I paid a great deal of money for those men, Natalie. You've cost me again. You do have a talent for costing me things. Victor. I know his name now. Victor went on, gentle, unhurried. Took some doing. That grave the government dug for him is very deep. But you'd be amazed what ruined men can afford when they stop caring what it costs them. A pause. Daniel Brooks. Formerly of a program that doesn't have a name I'm allowed to say on a phone. Presumed dead 11 years. A wife in the ground and a little girl named Lily, who's let me see 9 years old now. Fillmore Elementary, room 4B. Daniel's whole body turned to stone against her. You leave the kid out of this, he said the first words he'd spoken into the phone, low and flat and absolutely without mercy. You hearing me, Hale? Whatever this is between you and her, the kid is not in it. You touch one hair, and I promise you on my wife's grave and my daughter's life, there is no hole deep enough. You understand me. There is nowhere on this earth. A silence on the line. Silence on the line. And then Victor Hale laughed softly and said the thing that changed everything. Oh, Daniel, he said. You misunderstand. I don't want to touch your little girl. A pause, luxurious, cruel, delighted. I already have someone with her. The phone went dead. Daniel was gone before the screen went dark. He didn't take the stairs. He took them 4 at a time, and then not at all. He was a blur, up 4 flights, and Natalie was somewhere behind him, screaming something, and it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. There was only the door, 2 down from his own, and the special knock, and the rule, only me, only you, only me. and he hit Mrs. Alvarez's door with the flat of his hand hard enough to rattle it in the frame. Rosa, it's Daniel, open the door. Nothing. Rosa. And then the door opened, and it wasn't Rosa Alvarez. It was a woman Daniel had never seen. Calm, unhurried, with Rosa Alvarez sitting behind her on the couch, white-faced and rigid and unhurt, and Lily. Lily standing beside the woman. Lily with the woman's hand resting light as a feather on her shoulder. Lily looking up at her father with enormous confused eyes and saying, "Dad?" She said she knows you. She said the password. The woman smiled at Daniel. Pleasant. Professional. "Hello, Daniel," she said. "She's fine. She's completely fine. I haven't touched her, and I'm not going to, as long as everyone stays very calm." Her eyes flicked past him to Natalie arriving breathless at the top of the stairs, and something in them sharpened with what almost looked like recognition. "Hello, Natalie. You look terrible. You should sit down before you fall down." Natalie stopped dead. Because she knew that voice. Because she'd trusted that voice for 6 years. Because it was the voice that had held her hand at her mother's funeral. The voice that had talked her out of quitting twice. The voice she had 4 hours ago in Daniel's kitchen, defended so fiercely, the one person before the money. "Priya," Natalie whispered. Her assistant. Her shadow. The woman who knew her schedule, her routes, her private phone, her every move for 6 years. Not Marcus. Not Victor's inside man, being someone she barely knew. "Priya." "You said 4 people knew where I'd be," Natalie said, and her voice came out of her like something breaking. "You made the list of 4 for me. You're the one who told me it was 4. You left yourself off your own list." "I did," Priya said, and she sounded almost sorry. "You never counted me, Natalie. In 6 years, I stood next to you at every terrible moment of your life, and you never once counted me as a person who could hurt you, because you never counted me as a person at all. I was the phone. I was the calendar. I was the thing that got you your coffee." A small, terrible smile. "Do you know what Victor offered me? He didn't offer me money first. That's what you'd have done. You'd have led with money. He asked me my name. He asked me what I wanted. Nobody's asked me that in 6 years." Daniel had not moved. He was 3 feet from his daughter and a stranger's hand on her shoulder, and every instinct in 20 years of training screamed at him to close the distance and end this, and he did not move because the woman was calm, and calm was the dangerous kind, and there was something in her other hand, held low against her leg, that he could not see. "Lily," Daniel said, and his voice was so gentle, it broke Natalie's heart. "Hey, Bug. You okay?" "I'm okay, Dad. She's nice. She just wanted to wait for you." Lily looked between the adults and the first thread of real fear entered her voice, because children always know, they know before anyone tells them. "Dad, why's everyone scared?" "Nobody's scared, baby." "You're doing the calm voice. You only do the calm voice when—" "Lily." Priya's hand tightened just slightly on the little girl's shoulder, and Daniel's whole world narrowed to that hand. "Be quiet now, sweetheart. The grown-ups are talking." "Take your hand off my daughter," Daniel said. "In a moment, when we've come to an understanding." Priya's eyes stayed on him, cool and assessing. "Victor wants Natalie, that's all. He wants her alone at a place of his choosing tomorrow night. He wants to look at her while he tells her what she did to him. That's the whole transaction. He gets his hour with her, and everyone here goes back to their sad little lives, and the smile again. I disappear with enough money to become a person for the first time in my adult life. Nobody has to get hurt. Not the neighbor, not the child. Not you, Daniel, and believe me, after tonight, that's a courtesy I'm extending at some personal risk. You want me to hand you Natalie," Daniel said flatly. "I want Natalie to hand us Natalie," Priya corrected. "She's very good at doing hard things to protect people. It's her one genuine virtue. I imagine she'll volunteer." "I'll go," Natalie said instantly. "No," Daniel said. "Daniel. No. That's not Natalie. That's not how this works. You don't know what he'll—" "I know exactly what he'll do," Natalie said, and she was very calm now, calmer than she'd been in 2 days because there was finally a decision in front of her that she understood. "He'll kill me. That's what the hour is for. He wants to watch me understand it's happening. And I'll go and I'll let him if that's what it takes to get this woman's hand off that little girl. She looked at Priya. Yes, that's the deal. I walk out of here with you right now tonight, and the child stays safe. And Priya looked at her for a long moment, and something flickered across her face. Surprise. Maybe that Natalie had offered so fast, or something older and sadder, and she said, "You really would. You'd walk out that door to your own funeral right now for a child you met 4 hours ago." She shook her head slowly. "You'd do it for a stranger's kid. But in 6 years, you never once asked me how my mother was doing. She died in March, Natalie. You sent flowers. Your card had my name spelled wrong." The room was silent. And Daniel Brooks, who had been watching that low hand this whole time, who had been counting seconds and measuring distance and waiting for the one thing he needed, saw it happen. Saw Priya's attention slip, just slightly. Just for a heartbeat off him and onto Natalie, onto the old grief, onto the thing she'd carried for 6 years and finally gotten to say out loud. Her hand came off Lily's shoulder, just an inch, just a gesture to point to make Natalie see her. An inch was all Daniel had ever needed. "Lily," Daniel said, calm as still water. "Fire drill." And his daughter, his brave, brilliant 9-year-old daughter, who had practiced this 100 times as a game, and never once known why, dropped straight down out from under that hand like a stone, exactly the way they'd rehearsed, small and fast and low, and rolled toward her father's legs. And Daniel closed the 12 feet of that little apartment, in a time that Natalie would not have believed if she hadn't seen it, and got his body between the stranger and his child, and it was over almost before it began. Almost. Because Priya's low hand came up, and it wasn't a gun. It was worse in that small room. It was a blade, short and bright, and she was faster than she had any right to be, faster than an assistant should be. And Daniel took her wrist, but not before the blade opened a line across his forearm, and he felt the old familiar heat of it, and ignored it, and turned the wrist until the blade dropped and put her down against the wall. Controlled, contained no more than he had to. And then it was quiet, except for Lily crying against his legs, and Rosa Alvarez praying in Spanish on the couch, and Natalie Carter standing frozen in the doorway with her whole understanding of her own life lying in pieces at her feet. Daniel had Priya secured against the wall, his bleeding forearm across her collarbone, his daughter's arms locked around his knee, and he looked up at Natalie, and he said the only thing there was to say. He knew we'd win tonight. Natalie stared at him. What? Victor. This wasn't the play. Daniel's face was gray, and it wasn't the cut on his arm. 3 men on the street I could beat. 1 woman with a knife in a room with my kid. He knew I'd get through it. He wanted me to get through it. So why send them at all? What does a ruined man who wants to watch by with 3 men, he knows he's going to lose? And Natalie, whose mind was the fastest thing about her, even now, even shattered, even with the world in pieces, felt the ice close over her heart as she understood. Time, she whispered. He bought time, and a location. He bought a location, Daniel agreed grimly. Hours. He doesn't want you at a place of his choosing tomorrow night, Natalie. That was the lie. He needed us to stay put, all of us in one building tonight, while his real people... He stopped. His head turned toward the window, toward the street. Toward the 2 operations Ray had said didn't know about each other. Except Ray had been wrong. They weren't 2 operations. They were bait and hook. And somewhere below, the second sedan. The one that wasn't Victor's. The one Ray couldn't name. The one they'd all forgotten in the chaos of the 3 men, and the wrench and the knife was no longer parked across the street. Its doors were open. And it was empty. An empty car meant men on foot. And men on foot in a building meant Daniel had seconds, not minutes, and he did the math the way he'd done all the other math that night, fast, cold, and without letting any of it show on his face for Lily's sake. Rosa, he said. Rosa, look at me. I need you to be brave one more time. The old woman's praying stopped. Bathroom, you and Lily, lock it. Get in the tub low as you can, and you do not open that door for anybody. Not for me, not for the police. Not for anybody until you hear me say the word sunflower. Can you do that? Sunflower. Rosa repeated, already up, already moving, 68 years old, and steadier than half the men Daniel had ever worked with. Come, mija, come with Rosa. Dad, Lily's arms tightened around his leg. Bug, look at me. He crouched fast, took her face in his bleeding hands, and it cost him everything he had to make his voice gentle. You did the fire drill perfect. You hear me, perfect. Best I ever saw. Now I need one more brave thing, and then it's over, and we get pancakes. Okay? Go with Rosa. Word sunflower. What's the word? Sunflower. That's my girl. Go. And she went, and the bathroom door closed, and the lock turned, and Daniel stood up, and he was not a father anymore. Not for the next little while. He couldn't afford to be. Natalie. He was already moving. Priya dragging her by the collar toward the radiator, pulling a zip tie from his own belt. He'd carried them for 11 years. 2. Some habits you don't get to bury, and cinching her wrist to the iron. How many rounds you got in you? What? Fight, run, freeze. Those are the 3. You've done fight and run tonight already, both good, both better than most. I need to know which one's left in the tank, because in about 90 seconds this hallway is going to have men in it, and I can't watch you and them both. Natalie looked at him. At the blood running off his fingertips. At the woman zip-tied to the radiator who used to bring her coffee. At the closed bathroom door with a child behind it. And something in Natalie Carter that had been coming loose for 2 days finally tore free of its moorings, and what was underneath was not the CEO, and was not the frightened woman from the parking lot. It was something older. Something from before the money, before Victor, before the company. A 7-year-old in a house where crying got you nothing, and you learned very young that if you wanted to survive, you did not wait to be saved. I've got fight, she said. Tell me where to stand. Daniel looked at her for half a second, and God help him, in the middle of all of it, he almost smiled. Behind me, he said. But not far. The first man came through the stairwell door at the end of the hall at a dead run, and Daniel met him before he cleared the frame, and it was ugly and fast and close, and this one was better than the street men. This one was the kind Ray meant when he said, "This is money and this is patience." And Daniel took 2 hits he didn't want, and gave back 3. The man wanted even less, and put him down against the wall. But there was a second right behind him, and this one had learned from watching the first one die, and he didn't rush the door. He stopped in the frame and raised a gun and had all the time in the world. Down! Daniel shouted and shoved Natalie into the doorway of Rosa's apartment out of the line, and there was nowhere for Daniel himself to go. The shot never came. Because Natalie Carter, from the floor of the doorway where Daniel had shoved her, had grabbed the one thing in reach, a heavy ceramic lamp off Rosa's little hall table, and thrown it. Not well, not like Daniel threw a wrench, but hard, and at the right instant, and it caught the gunman in the side of the head, and spoiled his aim by exactly the 6 inches that mattered, and the shot went into the ceiling, and then Daniel was on him, and then it was done. Silence. Daniel stood in the wrecked hallway, breathing like a bellows, and looked down at Natalie on the floor with plaster dust in her hair and her chest heaving. "You throw worse than my daughter," he said. "I hit him, didn't I?" "You hit him." He reached down and hauled her up. "Remind me to teach you, later, when people aren't shooting." "Is that a promise there's going to be a later?" And Daniel, holding her hand in a hallway full of unconscious men, with his own blood on both their palms, said the truest thing he'd said in 11 years. "Yeah," he said. "It's a promise." Ray came through the stairwell 40 minutes ahead of his own estimate, which meant he'd broken every law between his place and Daniel's, and he came through it the way old professionals come through a door. Low, careful, gun down, but ready. An old man moving like a much younger one. He took in the hallway in a single sweep. 3 men down. A woman zip-tied to a radiator. A CEO with plaster in her hair. And Daniel bleeding upright alive. "Well," Ray said, "you made a mess." "Ray, Danny." And the old man's dry voice cracked just once, just for a second, at the sight of a man he'd buried in his own heart 11 years ago, standing in front of him breathing. "Look at you, all grown up and still can't stay out of trouble." He holstered the gun. "Kid bin bathroom, safe, word sunflower, good word." Ray was already moving to check the downed men cuffing wrists, professional unhurried. Cavalry's about 10 minutes behind me, real cavalry people. I still know people who owe me. They'll take these 3 off your hands, and this one, a nod at Priya, off everybody's. This never happened, by the way, officially. You're gonna find that out in about a week when nobody comes asking you anything. He glanced up. That's the deal with the grave they dug you, Danny. It cuts both ways. They kept you dead all these years. Tonight it means nobody ever knows you were alive. Daniel nodded slowly. Then, Ray, it's not over. Ray went still. Say again. 3 Street, 1 knife, 2 here. That's 6 men Victor spent tonight, and Ray he knew he'd lose all 6. Daniel's voice was flat and terrible. 6 men is a distraction. 6 men is what you spend to make everybody look one direction while the real thing happens somewhere else. Ray's eyes narrowed. You said he wanted her at a place tomorrow night. He lied. The place tomorrow night was a lie to make us feel like we had time. Daniel turned to Natalie. Think. Tonight. Right now, while every person who protects you is standing in this hallway, 40 floors below where you should be, what's undefended? What did you leave open when you ran to me? Not you. You're here. What else is yours? And Natalie Carter's face drained of every color it had. Oh God, she whispered. The building. The company. Tonight. What about tonight? The servers. Her hand went to her mouth. Tonight at midnight we push the update. The whole thing, everything Victor wanted to sell to the defense contractor, everything. I wouldn't let him sell. It's all in the core architecture. And tonight Daniel, the entire company is in a maintenance window right now. Security's rotated to skeleton. Half. My people are home, and the one person who scheduled all of that, who set the maintenance window, who told everyone it was safe to go home tonight. She stopped. She looked at the woman zip-tied to the radiator. Priya scheduled it, 3 weeks ago, right after Victor's card came. Priya against the radiator said nothing, but she smiled, and that smile told them everything. He's not going to kill you, Daniel said slowly, understanding it all at once. He never wanted to kill you. That's the thing that never fit a man that patient, that careful, and his big play is a street kidnapping. No. Killing you ends it too fast. Killing you don't have to watch. He looked at Natalie with something like awful admiration for the mind they were up against. He wants to take the company, tonight, while it's open. While you're across town bleeding on my floor thinking you're the one in danger. He wants you to survive, Natalie. He wants you alive and safe and ruined so you can spend the rest of your life the way he spent the last 4 years. He wants to do to you exactly what you did to him. The silence in the hallway was total. How long? Ray said quietly. Till this update pushes. Natalie looked at her watch and the world tilted. 11 minutes, she said. They did not have time for a plan, so Daniel made one in the elevator. Ray, stay. Kid neighbor, these 6 you hold this ground. When your people come, they secure this and only this. Nobody follows us. Danny. Rosa's got Lily. Word sunflower. You say it, she opens, not before. You do not leave that bathroom door until my daughter's in somebody's arms who loves her, you understand me. That's the only job that matters tonight. Not the company. Not Natalie. Her. Ray looked at him for a long moment, and something passed between 2 old professionals that didn't need words, and Ray said, Sunflower, go get your girl her father back. The elevator doors closed on Natalie, already dialing. Who are you calling? Daniel said. You said Priya scheduled it. Priya could have poisoned every number you've got. Not this one. Natalie put the phone to her ear, and her voice, when the line connected, was the voice that had built a company. Marcus, wake up. No, don't talk, listen. I need you at the server floor in 9 minutes, and I need you to trust me with no explanation, and I need you to know that I spent tonight suspecting you, and I was wrong, and I'm sorry, and there's no time to say it properly, so you're just going to have to believe I mean it. A pause. Because Victor Hale is taking the company at midnight, and Priya's been his the whole time, and I'm on my way, and I have... She looked at Daniel. I have someone with me. Go. Run. I'll explain when you're rich enough to sue me for it. She hung up. He'll go, she said. He was there before the money. He'll go. Daniel almost smiled. You said his name different that time. What? 2 days ago, you said you'd trusted Marcus for 11 years, length of time. Now you said his name like it's a feeling. Daniel watched the floor numbers climb. You got one back tonight, in the middle of losing one. That's not nothing, Natalie. Hold on to that. You're gonna need it in about 8 minutes. The Carter Dynamics Tower, at 11:54 at night, was a skeleton of itself. A maintenance window, a rotated skeleton crew, half the lights off exactly as Priya had scheduled it 3 weeks ago in cold blood. Natalie's badge got them through this lobby, and her thumbprint got them into the executive elevator, and Marcus Delgado met them at the server floor with his shirt untucked and his glasses crooked, and a look on his face like a man who'd run through a nightmare to get there. Natalie, what in God's... He stopped. He looked at Daniel. He looked at the blood. Who is... Later servers, talk to me. Marcus was already at a terminal, fingers flying. Update staged. Auto push at midnight 6 minutes. It's locked. Whoever said it used admin credentials top level. I can't stop it from here. I'd need... He went white. I'd need Priya's key. She has the other half of the launch authority. It's a 2-key system. You built it that way after Victor, remember. 2 people have to turn the key so no one person can ever do exactly what Victor's about to do. Natalie finished and put her face in her hands for 1 second and then took it out because there was no time for despair. The update isn't an update. It's a door. It hands him the architecture and locks me out of my own company. And it looks like I authorized it because it's got my key and her key, and everyone knows Priya is me. Priya is my authority. She turned to Daniel, and for the first time all night, she looked truly lost. I can't stop it. 2 keys. I have one. The other one's zip-tied to a radiator across town, smiling at Ray. There's no version of this where I turn both keys in 5 minutes. He built this so I couldn't. And Daniel Brooks, maintenance man, who had spent 2 days being underestimated by everyone, including himself, looked around the server floor. Really looked the way he looked at the world. The way that saw what things were, instead of what they were labeled, and said the sentence that saved everything. It's a 2-key software lock, he said slowly. On hardware that still runs on power and cooling that some guy has to maintain. Marcus blinked. What? You can't stop the update in software. Fine. Daniel was already moving, scanning the walls, the floor, the ceiling. So don't stop it in software. This whole floor's a machine, and I fix machines. He found what he was looking for, a gray panel low on the far wall, unmarked, the kind of thing nobody in an executive suite had ever looked at twice. Every server floor in America's got an emergency power isolation, fire safety, federal code. You can't build a data center without a way to kill the room if it catches fire, kills power, kills the push, kills everything hard down, no software involved. He was on his knees at the panel. It's always behind a safety cover, always needs a key or a break glass, always right about... The cover came off in his hands. Here, Natalie stared. You'd crash the entire system. Every server. That's Daniel, that's millions in damage, that's days of recovery, That's a company you still own in the morning, Daniel said, hand on the isolation switch, looking up at her. Your call. It's your house. I just know where the main breaker is. He held her eyes. 90 seconds, Natalie. What's it worth to you? And Natalie Carter, who had built her entire self on the certainty that you never gave up power, that you never took the loss that you fought for. Every dollar to the last. Looked at a maintenance man kneeling at a breaker with her whole empire in his hand, and understood that the most powerful thing she'd ever done was about to be letting something break on purpose. Do it, she said. Pull it. Daniel pulled it, and the whole floor died. The silence of a data center. Losing power is a specific and enormous thing. The roar of 1,000 cooling fans, winding down all at once into nothing. A machine the size of a building, exhaling and going still, and in that silence, at 11:57 at night, 3 minutes before midnight, Victor Hale's masterpiece, 4 years in the making, died in the dark, unpushed, undelivered, worth nothing. Marcus's terminal went black. then flickered to red emergency battery. A single line of text. Push failed, catastrophic power loss sequence aborted. Marcus made a sound that was half laugh and half sob. It aborted. The whole thing aborted. He didn't get it. Natalie, he didn't get any of it. It's the architecture's still ours. It's still, oh my God, a janitor just... He looked at Daniel like he'd grown a second head. Who are you? Guy who reads the manual, Daniel said, and stood up and swayed, and Natalie caught him because the cut on his forearm had been bleeding this whole time, and he'd been ignoring it this whole time, and now that the thing was done, his body was finally sending him the bill. Okay, Natalie said, getting her shoulder under his arm. Okay, that's enough. You're done. You've saved my life 3 times in 2 days, and my company once, and you're gray as a ghost, and I am putting you in a chair if I have to break your legs to do it. Natalie. Sit down, Daniel. And Daniel Brooks, for the first time in 2 days, in 11 years, in longer than he could remember, let someone else make the call and sat down. Natalie's phone rang. She almost didn't answer. But she looked at the screen, and it was unknown, and she knew, and she put it on speaker so Daniel could hear, because they were past the point of doing anything alone. You crashed your own servers, Victor Hale said. And for the first time in 2 days, the warmth was gone from his voice. For the first time, Victor Hale sounded like what he was, a ruined man who had just watched his last thing die. You'd rather burn it than let me have it. Do you have any idea what that push cost me to build 4 years? Everything. My last... His voice cracked. You take, and when you can't win, you just break it so nobody can have it. That's who you... Victor. Natalie's voice was quiet, not triumphant. Something else. Where are you? A silence. You think I'm going to tell you? You're close, Natalie said. You're watching. You've been watching this whole time. That's the only thing you ever really wanted, wasn't it, to watch? So you're close enough to see the lights go out just now. You're in this building, or across the street from it, or in a car in the garage, because you couldn't stand to do it remote. You needed to see me lose it. Her voice gentled, and it was the most dangerous it had been all night. You're not a monster, Victor. That's the sad part. I know exactly what you are because I almost became it. You're just a man who got broken and decided the only thing left worth doing was breaking the person who broke you. And I did break you. You're right about that. 4 years ago, I forced you out, and I told myself it was business, and it wasn't. Not all of it. I wanted to win, and I did, and I never once thought about what it did to you. A breath. I'm sorry, Victor. I mean that. And it doesn't change anything, because you put your hand on a 9-year-old tonight, and there's no sorry big enough to cross back over that. So here's what happens now. Daniel watched her from the chair, and something moved in his chest that he hadn't felt in 11 years. Not for a woman. Not like this, watching Natalie Carter stand in the ruins of her own server floor and be, for the first time since he'd met her completely and finally herself. You run, Natalie said. Tonight, right now, because the men who are coming to clean up your 6 soldiers are the kind of men who don't file paperwork, and they will be very interested in the person who hired them. You've got maybe an hour. Use it. Disappear. Become nobody. It's not so bad being nobody. I've got a friend who did it for 11 years, and he tells me it has its moments. She looked at Daniel when she said it. That's the whole deal, Victor. That's the only mercy I've got left in me. Run and live small and never come near me, or that child or that man again. Or stay and watch what Daniel's friends do to a man who put his hand on a little girl. Your call. It's your house now. I just know where the door is. Silence on the line. A long one. And then very quietly, Victor Hale said, You spelled her name wrong. On the flowers. Priya's mother. And the line went dead. And somewhere in the building or across the street or in the garage, a ruined man made a choice, and neither of them ever found out which, because Ray's people came, and Priya went with them into a silence deeper than the grave they'd dug. Daniel and Victor Hale was simply never heard from again in a way that Daniel understood, and Natalie chose not to ask about, because some walls you promise to respect. At 3:40 in the morning, in the emergency room, where a very tired doctor put 19 stitches in Daniel Brooks's forearm and asked no questions because a card had been quietly shown at the front desk that that made questions go away. Natalie Carter sat in a plastic chair beside the bed and held a 9-year-old girl who had refused to sleep until she could see her father with her own eyes. Lily had been retrieved from Rosa's bathtub at the word sunflower and had cried and had been carried down and driven across town and installed in this chair and told her father was fine and had not believed anyone until the moment the curtain pulled back and she saw him sitting up gray and stitched and alive. And then she had flown across the room into him hard enough to make the doctor wince, and Daniel had held her with his good arm and said, "Pancakes, right? I promised pancakes." And Lily had laughed and cried at the same time, and now she was asleep against Natalie's shoulder, worn all the way out, one small hand fisted in Natalie's ruined coat. Natalie looked down at the sleeping child. Then she looked at Daniel, who was watching them both with an expression she couldn't name and didn't try to. "I want to say something," Natalie said quietly, so as not to wake Lily. And I want to say it wrong because I say everything wrong when it's real, so just let me get through it. Okay. 2 days ago, a man saved my life in a parking lot, and I offered him money because money is the only language I knew how to say thank you in. Her voice was low and steady. And he said no, not everybody wants something, and I didn't believe him. I thought it was a line. I thought everybody wanted something, and he just hadn't named his price yet. She looked at Lily asleep on her shoulder. And then I spent 2 days watching a man throw away a gun and take a knife for me and put his own daughter in a bathtub and walk into a hallway full of men with guns and crash his own crash my company to save it and bleed for me over and over and never once, not one single time ask me for anything. Her eyes came up to his and they were wet and she let them be. And I finally figured out what you want, Daniel Brooks. I finally figured out your price. Yeah. Daniel's voice was rough. What's my price? Natalie looked down at the child asleep in her arms and back up at him, and she said the truest thing she'd ever said to anyone. Nothing, she whispered. That's the price. That's the whole thing. You just wanted a small life and a safe kid and to be left alone. And I walked into it 2 days ago and blew it to pieces and you saved me anyway, and you never sent me a bill. A tear went down her face, and she didn't wipe it. Nobody in my whole life has ever wanted nothing from me, and it turns out that's the only thing I've ever actually wanted from anybody. The heart monitor beeped steady and slow. Lily breathed against her shoulder. Daniel looked at the woman holding his sleeping daughter, like she was something precious, and felt 11 years of a wall he'd built in a hospital hallway, just like this one crack straight down the middle. "Natalie," he said quietly, "you don't have to say anything. I know I don't." He reached out with his good hand, the one without the stitches, and covered hers where it rested on Lily's back. "I'm gonna anyway. First time in 11 years, I've wanted to say something to a person more than I've wanted to stay quiet and safe. So let me get it wrong too." Natalie went still. "I built a life out of not needing anybody," Daniel said. "Told myself it was for her. It was mostly, but it was for me too. Needing people is how they get taken from you. I learned that in a hallway like this one, holding somebody's hand while she—" He stopped, breathed. "So I stopped needing. 11 years. And it worked. It kept us both safe and small and alone." He looked at her. "And then a woman got dragged out of a car 30 feet from me, and my whole body moved before I could stop it, and I've spent 2 days wondering why. Why that? Why her? Why, after 11 years of being nobody, did she make me forget I ever wanted to be?" "Daniel, because you don't want anything from me either," he said. "That's why. It took me 2 days to see it. Everybody in my old life wanted me for what I could do. Everybody wanted the weapon. And you're the only person I've met in 11 years who looked at me and didn't want the thing I'm good at. You just wanted the guy who claps wrong at a science poster." His voice broke finally, the last wall going. "That's the guy I've been trying to be this whole time. And you're the first person who ever just wanted him." Lily stirred between them and settled and slept on, and Natalie Carter and Daniel Brooks sat in the gray light of an emergency room at 4 in the morning with a sleeping child between their hands. Two people who had spent their whole lives believing that needing someone was the same as being weak, and that being alone was the same as being safe, and neither one said anything else because nothing else needed saying. And for the first time in 11 years for one of them, and forever for the other, the silence wasn't lonely. It was just quiet. The good kind. The kind that means you're finally home, and you don't have to fight anymore, and someone is going to be there when you wake up. The pancakes happened at 9 that morning, because Daniel Brooks kept his promises, even the ones he made with 19 stitches in his arm. He couldn't flip them one-handed, so Lily flipped them, standing on her chair at the stove with her tongue between her teeth in concentration, and Natalie stood beside her, holding the spatula ready, like a surgical assistant, and Daniel sat at his own kitchen table for once being the one who got served and found he didn't hate it as much as he'd expected to. "You're clapping wrong," Lily informed Natalie when the first pancake landed intact. "I'm not clapping, I'm holding a spatula." "You're gonna clap wrong later," Dad said. "He said everybody does." Natalie looked over the child's head at Daniel, who was very interested in his coffee cup all of a sudden, and she said, "Did he now?" And Daniel said, "It's a documented fact." And Lily said, "What's documented mean?" And for a minute the whole kitchen was ordinary. So ordinary it made Natalie's chest ache because she'd never once had a morning like this in her entire life, and she was 36 years old. "I have to go into the office today," Natalie said when the pancakes were gone. "There's the servers. It's going to be a long few weeks putting it all back. And there are questions about what happened, about Priya." Daniel nodded slowly. "You gonna be okay? Doing that alone?" And Natalie looked at him, and something passed between them that had been building since a parking lot in the rain, and she said, "That's the thing I came to figure out. Whether I'd be doing it alone." The kitchen went quiet. "Lily," Daniel said, "go brush your teeth, bug." "I already did." "Do it again. Grown-ups are talking." Lily rolled her eyes with the theatrical suffering of a 9-year-old and stomped off. And the second the bathroom door closed, Natalie sat down across from Daniel and put both her hands flat on the table. "I want to offer you a job," she said. "And I need you to hear the whole thing before you say no, because I know you and you're going to say no before I finish the sentence." "Natalie, see, you're doing it." She almost smiled. "2 days ago, I offered you a job leading my security, and you'd have been right to turn it down because that job is the weapon. That job is exactly the thing you spent 11 years running from. I understand that now. I didn't then." She took a breath. "So I'm not offering you that. I'm offering you something I made up at 4 this morning in an emergency room watching you hold your daughter." "What is it?" "I want to build a crisis division, not security, not bodyguards, something that doesn't exist yet." Her voice picked up speed the way it did when she believed something. "Carter Dynamics is going to survive last night, and when it does, I'm going to have more money and attention than I know what to do with, and I want to point it at the thing. Nobody points money at the people who fall through. The single parents working night shifts. The veterans, nobody hires. The workers, everybody looks straight through. I looked through you for 2 days, Daniel. I looked through the man who saved my life because he was wearing the wrong shirt. And I don't want to be that person anymore, and I don't know how to stop being her by myself." She met his eyes. "I want you to run it. Not because you're good with your hands, though you are. Because you spent 11 years being invisible, and you know exactly what it costs. And you're the only person I've ever met who could build something that actually finds people before they break instead of after." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "That's not a bodyguard job," he said slowly. "No. That's not the weapon. No." Natalie's voice was soft. "That's the opposite of the weapon. That's the thing you'd have wanted to be if losing Sarah hadn't taught you the only way to protect people was to hurt other people first. It's a job where the thing you're good at is the caring, Daniel. Not the fighting. The seeing. You see people. You saw me." A tear stood in her eye and she let it. "I want to build a whole company around the way you see people. And I want you home for dinner every single night to do it. And I want you to never once have to choose between saving somebody and being there for that little girl, because that choice is the thing that broke you, and I am not going to let it break you again." The bathroom door opened. Lily's voice, "Are you done talking yet?" "Almost, bug. 2 minutes." The door closed. Daniel looked at the woman across his kitchen table. At the wrench mounted over his door, first thing I ever fixed after, and at the framed photo turned slightly away from the room that he'd never explained, and she'd never asked about. And he did something he hadn't done in 11 years. He got up, and he crossed the kitchen, and he turned the photo around to face the room. Natalie looked. It was a young woman laughing holding a baby, Sarah, and Lily weeks old. I turned her away from the room the day of the funeral, Daniel said quietly. Couldn't look at her and keep breathing. Told myself I'd turn her back when it stopped hurting. He looked at the photo. It never stopped hurting. So she's been facing the wall for 11 years, and I've been facing the wall right along with her, and I called it protecting Lily, but Ray was right. Hiding's not the same as protecting. It never was. He turned to Natalie. You know what my daughter said to me once? She's 9. She said, Dad, how come we never have anybody over? And I gave her some answer about the apartment being small. And she said, his voice caught. She said, is it because Mom's not here to invite them? Natalie's hand went to her mouth. A 9-year-old figured out in one sentence what I'd hidden from myself for a decade, Daniel said. I wasn't keeping her safe. I was keeping her alone. Same as me. 2 people in a small apartment with a photo facing the wall, and I called it love. He looked at Sarah's laughing face, and then at Natalie's crying one, and something in him that had been clenched for 11 years finally let go. She'd have liked you, he said. Sarah. She was always after me to need people. Said needing folks wasn't weakness, it was just being alive. I didn't listen. Took me 11 years and a kidnapping to hear it. Daniel. Yeah, he said. Natalie blinked. Yeah, what? Yeah to the job. Yeah to the crisis thing. Yeah to home for dinner every night. He crossed back to the table and stood in front of her. Yeah to all of it. But I want to be honest about why, because you're honest with me, and you deserve it back. He took a breath. I'm not saying yes because it's a good job. I'm saying yes because 2 days ago I was a dead man walking around in a janitor's uniform, keeping myself and my kid in a little box where nothing could hurt us, and nothing could reach us, and nothing could matter. And you reached in. You blew the box wide open. And it was the worst 2 days of my life since the hospital. And it's also the most alive I've been since Sarah. And I'm not... His voice broke completely now, all the way, 11 years of it. I'm not going back in the box, Natalie. I can't. You showed me what's outside it, and I can't unsee it. So yeah, yes. To the job and to the dinners, and to whatever this is between us that neither one of us is brave enough to name yet, yes. And Natalie Carter stood up and put her arms around a man with 19 stitches and 11 years of grief and a daughter brushing her teeth for the 3rd time. And she held on, and he held on back, and for a long moment, neither of them said anything at all. Are you hugging? Lily's voice scandalized, delighted from the doorway. They broke apart. Sort of. Not really. Yeah, Daniel said. We're hugging. Lily considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. Then she walked over and wedged herself between them and wrapped her arms around both their legs and said, Okay, now it's a real hug. And it was. 1 year later, Lily Brooks stood in front of her entire 4th grade class at Fillmore Elementary, holding a cardboard poster, and cleared her throat the way she'd practiced. Daniel sat in the 2nd row of little folding chairs in a suit that Natalie had made him buy, and that he still didn't feel right in next to Natalie, who was holding his hand openly. Now, the way she'd been holding it openly for a year in front of anyone at board meetings in grocery stores and parent-teacher conferences, because it turned out that once Natalie Carter decided she wanted a life instead of a company, she was as relentless about it as she'd been about everything else. Carter Dynamics had survived. More than survived. The crisis division Daniel built had a name now, and 40 employees, and a waiting list of single parents and veterans and night shift workers who'd spent their whole lives being looked straight through and who walked into Daniel's offices and found maybe for the first time somebody who actually saw them. Ray consulted for them sometimes. Marcus ran operations. And Priya's name was never spoken, and Victor Hale was never found, and some walls stayed exactly where they were, and that was all right. My presentation, Lily announced, is called Why Things Break and How We Fix Them. She flipped the poster. It had a light bulb on it, and a heart, the same two pictures she'd drawn a year ago, and Daniel felt Natalie's hand tighten on his. "A lot of things break," Lily said in her clear, serious 9-going-on-10 voice. "Light bulbs break. Machines break. My dad fixes machines. He's real good at it. He can fix anything with a motor." She paused. "But this year I learned that people break too. Not like a machine, but kind of like a machine. And you can't fix a person with a wrench." The classroom was quiet. The parents had stopped rustling. "My dad was broken for a long time," Lily said, matter of fact, the way children say the truest things. "I didn't know it because he hid it real good. He hid it so I wouldn't be scared. But he had a picture on the wall that faced the wrong way, and we never had anybody over, and he thought that was keeping me safe." She looked out at the second row right at him. "And then my friend Natalie came, and she was broken too, in a different way. She had all the money in the world, and nobody to eat dinner with. And they were both so busy hiding their broken parts that they almost missed it." Daniel's throat was tight. Natalie had stopped breathing beside him. "But here's what I learned for my science project," Lily said, and turned the poster to show the last thing she'd drawn: the light bulb and the heart. And between them, a plus sign and an equal sign and a house. "Broken things can get fixed. But not by yourself. You can't fix your own broken part because you can't reach it. It's on your back where your hands don't go." She said it so simply. "You need somebody else to reach it for you. My dad fixed Natalie's broken part, and Natalie fixed my dad's, and it turns out the thing that fixes people isn't a wrench." She smiled, gap-toothed, radiant. "It's when somebody cares enough to try. That's my hypothesis. And I proved it." The end. The classroom applauded. The parents applauded. And in the second row, Natalie Carter, who had negotiated in front of senators and closed billion-dollar deals and stared down men with guns, clapped for a 9-year-old's science presentation and got it completely hopelessly wrong, too fast and off the beat. And Daniel leaned over and whispered, "Told you. Everybody does." And Natalie laughed with tears running down her face and didn't care who saw. Afterward, in the parking lot, Lily ran ahead to show a friend her poster, and Daniel and Natalie walked slow. "She's going to be a scientist," Natalie said. "Or a poet. I can't tell which. Both, probably. She doesn't do things halfway." Daniel glanced at her. "Wonder where she gets it." Natalie bumped his shoulder with hers. Then she stopped walking, and Daniel stopped too, and she took both his hands the way she did the good one and the scarred one, and she said, "I have to tell you something, and I'm going to say it wrong." "You always say it wrong. It's my favorite thing about you. 2 years ago, a man saved my life in a parking lot, and I asked him what his price was." Her voice was steady now, no longer afraid of the real things. "And it took me 2 years to understand the answer. His price was nothing. He didn't want money or power or a job or a single thing I could buy." She squeezed his hands. "He just wanted to come home. That's all he ever wanted. A safe place, and a kid who was okay, and somebody to be there when he woke up. And I spent my whole life thinking the most powerful thing a person could do was need nobody." She looked up at him. "And it turns out the most powerful thing I ever did was need you. And let you need me back." Daniel looked at the woman standing in a school parking lot, holding both his hands, and at his daughter across the lot, laughing in the sun. And he thought about a hospital hallway 11 years ago, where he'd made 3 promises to a woman he was losing, and how he'd kept all 3, and it had nearly cost him everything, and how it had taken a stranger in the rain to teach him the promises had been wrong all along. "You know what I used to think my best skill was," he said quietly. "Back in the old life, I thought it was pulling people out of danger, getting them clear. That was the thing I was better at than almost anyone alive." He shook his head slowly. "But that's not it. I know that now. Pulling somebody out of danger, that's the easy part. Anybody scared enough moves fast enough." He lifted her hand and pressed it to his chest over the heart, the same picture his daughter had drawn on a poster twice now. "The hard part, the real skill, the one that took me 40 years and a woman in the rain to learn, is letting somebody all the way in. Close enough that losing them would end you. That's the thing I was never brave enough to do. And it turns out it's the only thing that ever mattered." Natalie's eyes were shining. "Daniel Brooks, are you saying what I think you're I'm saying I love you, Daniel said, plain and steady, and unafraid, a man who'd stopped hiding. I'm saying I've loved you since somewhere around the third plate of eggs, and I'm saying I'm done facing the wall. I'm saying come home. Not just for dinner. All the way home. You and me and that kid over there who's smarter than both of us put together. He almost laughed. I'm saying be a family, the real kind. The kind that scares me to death because I could lose it, and I'm saying it anyway out loud in a parking lot because you taught me that the being scared is the whole point. It means it's real. It means it matters. And Natalie Carter, who had built an empire out of the certainty that love was a distraction from success, who had believed for 36 years that being alone was the same as being safe, put her arms around the man who'd thrown away a gun to save a stranger and thrown a wrench to save her and crashed his own life open to let her in. And she said the truest and simplest thing she'd ever said in her life. I'm already home, she said. I've been home since the eggs. I was just waiting for you to catch up. Across the parking lot, Lily Brooks looked back at her father and the woman he loved, standing together in the sun, holding on to each other, like people who'd finally stopped being afraid. And she grinned, and she yelled the last line of the whole story across the blacktop for everyone to hear. You're hugging wrong, she shouted, delighted. But that's okay. Everybody does. And Daniel Brooks, father protector, the man. Everyone once looked straight threw back his head and laughed in the sunlight, holding the woman who saw him and the daughter who saved him, and knew all the way down to the bottom of his mended heart that the forgotten man had finally completely come home. And this time,